Hey guys, welcome again to my YouTube channel, to this new and third video. And as you might be guessing, of course, in this new video, I will be covering a new topic. It makes sense, right guys? However, despite being true that this is the third video, official third video of my YouTube channel, of this account, it's also true that this video at the same time represents the first of a new type of videos that I will be making and sharing with you, because after having presented the framework that I will be using to analyze topics, the framework that I identify with, I myself, thus this channel and the content that I will be making and sharing with you, it's time to apply the framework, right, that I explained, especially in the second video. And this is the reason why in this new video I will be finally applying it in a more practical way, let's say in a more direct way. And I will be doing it indeed concerning a relevant field, an important field in our life. And this is the area or the field of health. This video is about health, but I wanted to highlight that this video is the first of two, and this first part is titled Why Newtonian Medicine is Outdated. So this first part will be specifically focused on a critique of Newtonian medicine. And no worries, because I will be beginning and starting this presentation also by explaining, as I'm usually doing, the vocabulary that I will be using, right? Because if you want to be understood, the first task and thing to do is usually to explain the vocabulary that you are using. What do you mean by the terms that you are using? And this is the case of the term Newtonian medicine, right? I just would like to briefly highlight that I will be doing this critique, let's say, at two levels. So the first level critique, I have also called it first level critique. It's an ontological critique. So it's concerning the ontology, that is to say, the perspective on reality, the hypothesis on reality, the assumptions that Newtonian medicine is based on. And this is the reason why, since it's ontological, I'm also calling it first level critique. I will be also doing a second critique, a so-called second level critique, and it will be more connected with how this Newtonian medicine is applied or works, let's say. So it's an operational critique. It's more related to how it works, let's say, Newtonian medicine as a sector, let's say. And last but not least, I will be also commenting on a topic that I am very aware of how sensitive it can be. Of course, despite being sensitive, it's also at the same time a very important topic that needs to be covered, and that it's deeply connected with the core topic of this video. And I will be talking about inoculations. I'm aware that it's a sensitive topic, but as every field and every topic, the fact of being sensitive should never imply that it doesn't need to be covered and that it shouldn't be covered, right? And we shouldn't build a taboo on any topic. And I think that's the core aspect of a truly scientific spirit, character, and attitude, right? And be willing to question things, to debate, to exchange ideas, because I would say that this is the basis for building knowledge, right? And evolving. So this is also a principle that I wanted to highlight and share with you, because it's a principle, of course, that this account, this YouTube channel, and I identify with. And I think it's very important to be aware of how sensitive can certain topics be, but never take this as a synonym for hiding topics. We should be honest, natural, and open to question things. So I think that now we should be ready to dive into this new video and this interesting, sensitive, but very important topic. And now, guys, before diving into the topics, as I really like to do it, and as I have been doing in the last videos, I would like to remember certain main ideas, either from the last videos or just general ideas that I believe are useful and helpful in order to dive into the topics of this video, right? Even before diving into the first sub part, let's say, which is the vocabulary clarification of Newtonian medicine. So, concerning this section that I have called Remember, because it's things that we need to remember or that it could be useful to remember, I just would like to start by referring to a claim that is often used, right? When we claim that something is based in science, right? Very often we use this expression, this is based in science. But what does it really mean? When it is claimed that something is based in science, what it means is that something can be demonstrated to be true or false using what we know as the scientific method. However, we need to bear in mind that the scientific method, it's a process, it's a way of knowing that it's based on experimentation, observation, and measurement. But it's also based on the assumption that something is, let's say, true or real if it's universally reproducible, right? So when you are making the same experiment, you should be able to be observing the same result repeatedly, constantly, right? And this is this assumption, right? That in order something to be true, it would need to be universally reproducible, in this case, through or by using the scientific method. Logically, I will be now, as I have been briefly doing, let's say, referring to the scientific method. So what I would say that it needs to be remembered or highlighted, because it's a very important idea, is that the scientific method can't be considered a neutral way of knowing. And there's no judgment in this phrase. I'm just describing that it cannot be considered a neutral way of knowing because it represents indeed a specific epistemology / epistemological approach that is rooted in a specific ontology. This is the materialist ontology. And this is the reason why the scientific method dismisses the influence or how consciousness shapes our reality. Consciousness, I'm using it as a broad term, but of course including our intentions, our beliefs, etc. How consciousness influences what we interpret as reality. And this is the reason why the scientific method is also overlooking the influence that our mental framework has in how we design experiments, how we carry out them, also the expectations that we have, because of course our intentions and expectations that are part of this mental framework that I was referring to, of course these expectations, and intuitions also influence how we are designing the experiment and also influence whether we choose a specific experiment or the other. So this is the reason why the scientific method is also dismissing and overlooking this aspect, right, of our mental framework, because of course our mental framework has a heavy influence on how we carry out the experiment. Why are we choosing to do a certain experiment and not the other? And last but not least, our mental framework also influences how we observe and also how we make sense of results. So, and this is the reason, right, why I was highlighting this idea. It's not a neutral way of knowing. I'm not denying that it can have its role, or it has had its role, let's say, no, it has helped us, the scientific method. But this should never mean nor imply that it's a neutral or a universal or an objective way of knowing. After having explained what this science label really means and also the scientific method, I will be finishing this remember section by explaining what scientism really is. So, according to scientism, modern science grounded in materialism and Newtonian physics, is believed to reveal the real world, a world that is supposed to exist independently of human observation. This is the reason why scientism is the belief that the outdated materialist ontology represents the only valid way to understand reality, the universe, and nature. And this is the case despite the fact that this materialist ontology has been challenged and also invalidated by quantum physics discoveries. As mentioned, now it's time to dive into the vocabulary clarification section. So what do I mean by using the term Newtonian medicine? So first of all, it's important to highlight that what we know as modern or conventional medicine is based on classical/Newtonian physics and materialism. The methods and beliefs of materialist science applied to the human being is what gave rise to what we know as modern medicine. And this is the reason why modern medicine is totally steeped in a materialist ontology concerning the fundamental nature of the universe, the physical world, and also human beings, including our human body. And this is the reason why I'm referring to modern medicine by a more specific term, indeed highlighting what's the ontology that modern medicine is based on. And since it's based on classical physics, chemistry, and materialism, I'm calling it Newtonian medicine. And now, concerning the implication of, let's say, having an ontology, the inevitable implications of an ontology is that it's true that an ontology, a perspective on reality, of course, it may help us to know. It may help us to focus on specific aspects and start investigating. But at the same time, an ontology may also condition how we create and how we build knowledge. That is to say, an ontology also conditions our epistemology, the way we gather and create knowledge. At the same time, and this is also, let's say, the second inevitable implication, negative inevitable implication, is the fact that an ontology may also limit our perception to only certain aspects of reality, leaving other phenomena literally, virtually invisible for us. So if we are not seeing phenomena, of course, this will imply that we don't know about their existence. And this is, let's say, the negative implication, or at least the implication that we should be aware of having a specific ontology. It will make us focus, let's say, on a specific side of reality, rendering very often other phenomena invisible. Before diving into the specific ontological critique, I would like to highlight that this first level ontological critique will be divided into two parts. The first one will be focused on explaining what are the main assumptions and beliefs within Newtonian medicine's ontology and why it's not valid anymore. And the second part will be, and it's deeply connected with this first part, but it's not focused on the ontology itself, but focused on the existence of a very important phenomenon which also points out to this invalid ontology, and this is the placebo effect. So the second part will be about the existence of the placebo effect. So Newtonian medicine's ontology, it's also sometimes called or known as metaphysical naturalism, consists of three main core beliefs. The first belief is what is known as physicalism, materialism, and this is the belief that everything arises from matter and measurable forms of energy. within this idea, or this idea could be also summarized by the expression matter consciousness principle, because it would imply that everything always starts from matter and everything would be always arising from it. And this is the reason why I'm using also this expression, right? Matter consciousness principle. Even consciousness or every phenomena within our reality would be a result of matter. Matter would always be the foundational essence, let's say. The second belief of Newtonian medicine's ontology is reductionism. And this is the idea that by analyzing the most basic components of a system, one should be able to understand the whole system. The third belief is known as mechanistic viewpoint, perhaps also mechanism, but it's more clear if we use the expression mechanistic viewpoint, is the idea that matter interacts through physical mechanisms following the laws of classical as opposed to quantum physics and chemistry. Now I will be explaining the more specific ideas, assumptions, and their implications of this ontology. So I will start by explaining that adherents to this ontology, they deny the existence of subtle energies. So they deny the existence of, for instance, vital forces or these subtle energies in our bodies, in the human body. Considering these terms and phenomena, the existence of these energies, let's say, unscientific. Adherents to this ontology, they also support what we could term or identify as the cell-centered assumption. Cells are literally treated as the fundamental units of life. And not only this, but as a result of this assumption, every aspect of our human experience and life is believed to emerge from the genetic and molecular activity in these cells. And this is the reason why I'm calling it a cell-centered assumption. Thus, according to it, even our consciousness, self-awareness, and also our physical form would be a result from the activity, as I mentioned, within these cells, even including our consciousness. And next idea is the one that concerns disease. According to this perspective, disease is seen as the result of external agents such as radiation, toxins, microbes, and even genetic defects, triggering pathological mechanisms at the cellular or molecular level. The last idea and implication of this slide concerning Newtonian medicine's ontology is the so-called suppressive treatment philosophy. Treatments are primarily suppressive and anti in nature. There are several examples for this, such as the existence of antipyretics and anti-inflammatories. Instead of focusing or trying to address any systemic or energetic imbalance that there might be within a person and within a body, these treatments are mainly focused on addressing symptoms. So they are more focused on eradicating symptoms rather than going to the roots that I have mentioned. Moving on to the last two specific ideas of the ontology Newtonian medicine is based on, I would like to firstly highlight the fact that Newtonian medicine is at the end more focused on disease instead of health. And this point is also very much connected with the previous one, the one that I have just explained about the existence of several medicines, chemicals, and treatments that are that are focused on going against a phenomenon within our body, a disease, right? And this is the reason why they are anti in nature. So this previous point that I was explaining is deeply connected with the one I'm explaining now, that due to the perspective held by Newtonian medicine, its focus is indeed on disease and not on health. And I know that this phrase can sound a bit harsh, but let's reflect on this for a moment. We tend to take for granted that focusing on disease is a synonym of focusing on health, right? We tend to think that they are the same action, they are synonyms in a sense, but the point that I'm making is that Newtonian medicine is at the end much more focused on eliminating and combating disease instead of, let's say, fully restoring health. Why am I saying that Newtonian medicine is not so focused on fully restoring health? Because it's not trying to go to the roots, let's say, to the very aspects that caused the disease. And this is the reason why. Can we talk about a focus on health if Newtonian medicine in this case is mainly addressing the symptoms? And this is the main idea that I wanted to highlight. And in my view, they are different things at its core, at its essence, let's say. And of course, what I would say that is missing, but this would be mentioned in the second part of this topic, so in the next video. But instead of focusing so much on eliminating disease, I'm not saying that disease is not important, but another way or another possible path, of course, would be to try to deeply address the roots of the disease and also try to support the human body's intelligence, right, and our self-healing capabilities. And the last idea of this section, in which I'm explaining, right, what are the main assumptions of Newtonian medicine's ontology, is the universal treatment, and what I have also called the so-called one-size-fits-all, in the sense that due to the reason that Newtonian medicine views our human body as a standardized and interchangeable system, of course, this has a major implication in how, for instance, a treatment is viewed, right? Treatments and medicines. And I'm specifically referring to the fact that if there are results coming from certain experiments and trials, but these experiments and trials were conducted on specific groups, according to Newtonian medicine, the fact that they were conducted on specific groups of people, it doesn't mean, or it doesn't have any major impact, because these findings or these results are still identified, treated, and viewed as something universal, universally applicable. And this is the point that I'm trying to highlight, that of course it's an assumption with very particular implications. If you are assuming that since we all have a human body, this literally means that independently from the person that we are and our context, our internal state, we will all be sharing the same kind of system because you view it as a standardized system, of course, you will be, let's say, reaching and drawing conclusions from specific experiments and present them as universally applicable. And this is the last idea that I wanted to highlight, and I would say that it's an evident phenomenon that we can all see in a sense, and it's that this perspective is totally overlooking and dismissing the huge variability that there is in terms of individual health and well-being. And our individual health and well-being, of course, is deeply shaped by our internal and emotional state, our consciousness, our physical form, our routine, the atmosphere, let's say, we live in. And of course, these are factors that conditioned in a positive or negative sense, but of course they influence our health context or our health state. And Newtonian medicine, with the assumption of universal treatment, is overlooking this. So after having explained what this Newtonian ontology really is, and also its specific core beliefs. As you might be remembering, they were three. They are three. And also the subsequent specific ideas, assumptions, and implications. I think it's time, let's say, to end this first level critique, this ontological critique, by drawing a conclusion, right? So I just would like to firstly clarify that these specific ideas that I have been mentioning, such as, for instance, how Newtonian ontology and its adherents deny the existence of subtle energies and vital forces within our human body, and also, for instance, the other specific idea and assumption that I was explaining about how Newtonian medicine views disease or tends to identify disease as something that always has a kind of external cause. So these specific ideas that I have been explaining with the last slides, they are part of the three core beliefs that I have firstly explained. So they are sub-elements that derive from these core beliefs. For instance, as I was mentioning, the denial of vital forces within our body, of course, is an idea, is an idea that is deriving from the core belief of physicalism, materialism, identifying matter as the foundational element of reality and also of our human body and form as well. So why am I making such a strong emphasis on the fact that these specific ideas derive from the three core beliefs that are physicalism, materialism, as you might be remembering? The second one is reductionism, and the third one is the mechanistic viewpoint of reality, and within this specific topic of the human body. So I'm making this strong emphasis because these three core beliefs, although they are treated as foundational truths within modern medicine and within modern science, although this has been the case and it's still the case for many humans, it's very important to highlight, and I know that it's a strong and imperative statement, but these three core beliefs, they are hypotheses. And it's not only the case, but they are hypotheses that have not been proven. They are unproven hypotheses. And this is not only the case, but they have not been proven, let alone through or by the scientific method, which is the method, as we all know, that modern science and medicine has always identified as the most, let's say, advanced and reliable method, as an inherent part of science, right? So, and this is the reason why, of course, it's a sensitive topic, but very relevant topic with very important implications, because this Newtonian ontology, this ontology that Newtonian medicine is based on, these three core beliefs, they have not been proven. And in addition, and as I was mentioning in the first videos, they have even been invalidated, questioned and invalidated by quantum physics experiments and discoveries. So this is the reason why I was also introducing these topics. And as I promised and mentioned, of course, they have huge implications, and also concerning this important, sensitive field of medicine, and in this case, concerning the ontology modern medicine is based on, this Newtonian ontology. So the second and last aspect within this ontological critique is the existence of the placebo effect. So the placebo effect is a well-documented and also scientifically recognized phenomenon. Studies have indeed shown that placebos can trigger real biochemical and physiological changes, including, for instance, the release of dopamine, endorphins, and immune-modulating substances. The placebo effect implies that belief, perception, and expectation can trigger real measurable healing. That is to say that our consciousness is indeed able to trigger this real healing. While it is true that Newtonian medicine accepts the placebo effect as a measurable phenomenon, and it's accepting that it's a scientifically recognized phenomenon, Newtonian medicine tends to downplay its implications, to limit its application to minor health issues, and also to keep the placebo effect compartmentalized and also underexplored. So, in the sense that it's not a field within health and within medicine that it's very deeply researched, let's say, within the framework of Newtonian medicine. So concerning the implications, I need to mention that the presence of the placebo effect within Newtonian medicine is clearly highlighting a great inconsistency within Newtonian medicine, because the placebo effect is highlighting and showing the non-material dynamics of health. So Newtonian medicine is not only accepting its existence, but as I have mentioned, and there are a lot of course, daily proofs and evidences, also academic, but Newtonian medicine, as I was saying, is also applying the placebo effect to certain issues, minor health issues. That's true, that it's limiting its application to minor health issues. And this is the reason why the presence of the placebo effect within Newtonian medicine is also showing that Newtonian medicine has, in a quiet way, but this represents a quiet acknowledgement and recognition of the non-material dynamics of health. Indeed, the placebo effect clearly underscores the profound connection that there is between consciousness, mind, and body. In addition, I just would like to add that since Newtonian medicine accepts the presence and even the utility of the placebo effect, but it's not applying it to major health issues, Newtonian medicine is also at the same time overlooking the placebo effect's potential benefits if it was to be applied to major health issues. So concerning the two main takeaways from these implications, I would like to mention that the placebo effect is perfectly aligning with principles in quantum physics, where observation and intention can affect reality, that is to say, matter. And within our specific example, or within the area that we are focusing on in this video, this would imply the ability to affect our human body, right? Which is apparently matter, but energy at its essence. These ideas that have been also highlighted by quantum physics align or could be summarized with the framework or the so-called consciousness matter principle, meaning that it is always consciousness, the foundational element of reality, and that matter only comes after consciousness, let's say. So concerning the second takeaway, the placebo effect and all these implications that I have been describing, of course they challenge Newtonian medicine completely, and the placebo effect is also corresponding to the framework of self-healing, in the sense that is showing our ability, our consciousness ability to heal ourselves. And of course, this is a totally different perspective, framework, view than the one held by Newtonian medicine. Now guys, finally I will be moving on to the second level critique, that is to say the operational critique. So as you know, I have divided this second level critique into two subparts, so that I will be starting with the first one. The first subpart of this critique is the following. the role of doctors in pharmaceutical over-reliance. So I will be starting with a general overview of this specific phenomenon before focusing and sharing with you more specific data. So let's say doctors' contribution to the prevalent and existent pharmaceutical over-reliance stems mainly from two factors, right? The first factor is doctors' adherence to the Newtonian ontology, the ontology that I have been explaining, right, that I have previously explained. So doctors' adherence to this Newtonian ontology, based, as you might know now, based on physicalism, materialism, reductionism, and that has a mechanistic viewpoint on our body, this leads doctors to view chemical interventions as the most effective way and even as the only way to restore health. And of course, this is a direct consequence, and this action, let's say, it's a reflection of certain beliefs that are part of the mentioned Newtonian ontology. I want to highlight what I consider a very important aspect, and is that this does not necessarily mean that the doctors that adhered themselves to this Newtonian ontology are acting in bad faith, in the sense that they are just promoting a dependence on pharmaceuticals with certain bad intentions. This is not necessarily always the case. However, what it suggests very often is that many doctors, and I want to clarify that I'm not doing it with any judgment, but I'm describing the phenomenon that I think that it's somehow very present and important, is that many doctors, after they have adhered themselves to this Newtonian ontology, and after they were taught this ontology early in their training when they were studying in universities, after they have been taught this way in university, many of them are not willing to question any of those beliefs that they embraced when they were in university, for instance, or in their training or their early career, for instance. This is quite important because the fact that you were trained and taught, let's say, within the framework of a specific ontology, of course, shouldn't imply that you are unable to question certain beliefs that you hold, or that you are even unable to continue investigating, checking, validating, right? Whether some emerging evidence is questioning a certain perspective that you might have on health, on our human body. I wanted to highlight this because I think that this might be a more common phenomenon, right? If you adhere yourself as a doctor to a specific ontology and you are, hey, I already bought the perspective on health, let's say, and I'm not going to change this. Of course, this is somehow problematic in the sense that we are nowadays in a specific context in which there is emerging evidence, especially concerning the experiments and discoveries that I was referring to from quantum physics, that are questioning the Newtonian ontology that many doctors have. The second aspect is, let's say, darker than the first one, and it's certain doctors' self-serving economic interests. And this is related with the phenomenon that certain doctors decide to accept certain gifts and payments from pharmaceutical companies. And of course, this clearly, in my opinion, and undoubtedly amplifies and reinforces this pharmaceutical over-reliance and over-prescription. I just wanted to mention that it's true that the first aspect or the first factor would be more structural, and it's quite important to reflect on this. The first factor is independent from the second factor. So let's say it's perfectly possible, and I would say that it's a more common example or case, that a certain doctor has embraced a specific ontology, in this case the Newtonian ontology, and is viewing health through these lenses, and as a result of these lenses he's promoting this approach to health and, in a sense, this pharmaceutical over-reliance as well. And this is perfectly possible without this doctor being involved in darker practices, such as, for instance, receiving payments and gifts from pharmaceutical companies, from the pharmaceutical industry, or even being like in touch with this pharmaceutical industry in order to support its interests, instead of, for instance, really supporting the real health of people. And I think it's important also to make this distinction, and it's also fair to do it. As I have mentioned, now I will be giving you some more specific data and more data concerning numbers, right? So I will be giving some specific data, and more specifically regarding the case of Spain and the US, because I don't want to make this section very long. Of course, I will be sharing with you a lot of sources and links, and also data that I will not be sharing with you in this short explanation. But of course, there's a lot of information, very representative data, and I just have selected what I believe are useful cases to explain this critique that I'm doing of Newtonian medicine, and specifically regarding the role of doctors in this pharmaceutical over-reliance. I will start by highlighting that numerous doctors and their scientific societies accept and receive millions of euros, dollars from drug companies in the form of transfers of value. This expression, right, transfers of value, is of course an euphemism that is used to refer to these direct payments and compensations that certain doctors accept and receive in exchange of their support or their service to the pharmaceutical industry, to the big pharma at the end. So concerning the case of Spain in the year 2022, these transfers of value reached the amount of 104 million euros, and this amount was distributed among nearly 92,000 public sector doctors. These doctors represent what are often known as stables of loyal prescribers, in the sense that they represent a group of loyal supporters indeed of the pharmaceutical industry's interests. It's quite interesting because the expression stable of loyal prescribers or supporters is indeed used by doctors that oppose these practices, these corrupt practices and payments that, in my view, of course, inevitably create a conflict of interests. Concerning the US case, doctors received over $12 billion between the years 2013 and 2022 in payments related to medical drugs and devices, involving almost 2/3 of the total amount of eligible physicians. ProPublica made indeed a study in the year 2016 in the US on the 50 top prescribed brand name drugs linked to doctor payments, and the study made the following discoveries. For 32 of these drugs, at least a 10% of doctors that were prescribing this medicine were receiving payments as a result of this prescription from the producer. For 46 out of the 50 analyzed drugs, doctors that were accepting and receiving payments from a specific producer, the finding was that these doctors were prescribing more of this drug in comparison with doctors that were not accepting and receiving payments. On average, doctors that were accepting and receiving payments were prescribing 58% more of that drug in comparison with doctors that were not accepting and receiving payments. Now, as I have mentioned, I will be focusing on the second subpart of this operational critique. As you have seen, I have been focusing on the doctor's role in this pharmaceutical over-reliance, because of course doctors themselves have their respective agency, right? They are not victims, they are an actor, they represent an actor. So this is of course also the case when we are talking about the pharmaceutical industry itself. The pharmaceutical industry itself is also an actor within this sector. So this is the reason why the second subpart will be focused on the pharmaceutical industry's involvement, in this case within Newtonian medicine, and also regarding this pharmaceutical over-reliance. So let's start with a general overview of this mentioned pharmaceutical industry's involvement. So there's a lot and enough evidence that shows that the involvement of the pharmaceutical industry has indeed a negative impact on medical science and the health sector. Indeed, top drug or pharmaceutical companies have been repeatedly convicted for several reasons and bad practices, such as promoting harmful drugs or medicines, fraud, price fixing, and even, and this is quite an important aspect because this is related with all the area of experimentation, top drug companies have also been convicted for evidence concealment. And it's not a surprise that if a given actor, in this case a given pharmaceutical company with, let's say, corrupt interests or practices, they of course will be at the end also acting or trying to control all the area of experimentation, because it's the area from which evidences come, right? And of course it's a very important area that the pharmaceutical product's credibility depends on. It's very important to highlight that these financial penalties that have often been imposed for the mentioned offenses, they are often somehow insignificant in comparison with their profits and with the profits that they continue earning, in a sense, also nowadays. It's also a very interesting point to highlight that it's still not clear whether, for instance, if a given company has legal repercussions in a specific country, it's still not clear whether this has an impact on the same company's activities but within another country or in another region. And last but not least, Peter Gotze, which was a former worker within Big Pharma, within the pharmaceutical industry, he published a very good book and straightforward as well that I will be recommending at the end of this video. And Peter Gotze, in this book, he literally exposes all these activities carried out by Big Pharma, and he's even saying publicly, very openly, that the definition of criminal organization's activities literally matches Big Pharma, so matches the pharmaceutical industry and its practices. And it's very interesting because this book is public. This book has been published and has been sold. And despite being this true, Peter Gotze has not been convicted for these harsh accusations of himself against the pharmaceutical industry. So I would claim that this is a very representative and big symptom of the mentioned reality that I'm describing, referring to and analyzing. Now I will be explaining the different ways that the pharmaceutical industry has to influence the health sector. The first one is the following: funding and payments that create conflicts of interest. So pharmaceutical companies usually support on a great scale, on a big scale, medical journals, and they also sponsor at the same time continuing medical education events. Of course, this sponsoring also creates conflicts among members of committees that are responsible for developing clinical practice guidelines. Logically and unsurprisingly, researchers that have ties, financial ties to this kind of sponsors, so with sponsors coming from the pharmaceutical industry, of course, they are much more likely to report findings, let's say, that will be beneficial to their sponsors. In this case, sponsors belonging to the pharmaceutical industry. And as I have previously explained, of course, payments to physicians and doctors is an aspect that evidently influences their behavior, their prescribing behavior. Now I will be explaining what's the second way that the pharmaceutical industry has to exercise its influence. And this is through the so-called ghost management of medical research. So the pharmaceutical company-sponsored clinical trials, they are audited, most of them are audited, designed, analyzed, and written up by the companies themselves and their hired subcontractors and professional writers. They are often known as professional writers. This enables pharmaceutical companies, of course, to choose the best populations and best comparison groups to carry out the experiment that they want to carry out, so that they are able to, let's say, perfectly and intentionally design the experiment so that they will be able to demonstrate their point. Of course, this has, let's say, a very manipulative realm, because if you are able to choose the specific population that you already guess that will show perhaps a positive effect concerning the medicine, the drug that you have created, this will enable you to sell, let's say, your narrative and to prove your point, in this case concerning the use of a specific medicine. It's quite representative and interesting and symptomatic as well that around 70 and 75% of the pharmaceutical industry's expenditure on clinical trials go indeed to these contract research organizations, these CROs, as they are often called, as they are often known as. And these contract research organizations are the actor, let's say, that the pharmaceutical industry usually hires to design and analyze and carry out the whole experiment. As you might be guessing, these CROs, so these contract research organizations, are a very important actor, because even when the experiments are led by academics, very often behind the scene they are often managed by these contract research organizations that are hired by the pharmaceutical industry, by pharmaceutical companies, and they work for them. So these contract research organizations very often are directly working for the pharmaceutical industry. So even if the experiments, and in this case the published articles, include independent researchers as nominal authors, very often they are a total creation of these pharmaceutical companies through the intervention, or let's say through the agency of these contract research or organizations, these subcontractors. As you might be understanding, I guess, this ghost management of medical research is a more subtle, if we can use this word, but of course it's more subtle than directly paying doctors, and it's a more subtle way that the pharmaceutical industry has to exercise its influence, to influence the experiments, to influence the credibility or the evidences concerning the use of medicines and medical drugs. And it's a very important and sensitive topic, because it's at the end showing that we should always be very critical and very aware, and not take for granted that just because it's a published article, just because the article has been published by certain famous authors or by academics, this does not mean, of course, that it has been done with integrity, let's say, or that the article has been written in an honest way. Now, guys, I will be moving on to the last section of this video. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, in the introduction, I was going to end the presentation, or the last subtopic, was going to be the example of the mRNA inoculations. As you know, the inoculations that were promoted during the time that we were, in a sense, forced to stay at home, right? You will be already understanding what I'm referring to. So, as I mentioned in the introduction as well, I have chosen this important and also sensitive topic, not only because it's an important one and it's of course a topic that concerns the area of health, but also because it's indeed a representative phenomenon of the critique that I have been doing, the two-level critique that I have been doing concerning Newtonian medicine. So this is the reason why I believe that it was very important to include this topic. So I will start by highlighting, and this is according to several professionals, academics, scientists, and also including doctors, that there has been a major increase of health risks after the mRNA vaccination, so after these specific inoculations, right? And one of the health risks that has been increasing is indeed something that is often known as serious adverse events. So according to several studies, but mainly according to the greatest study ever conducted concerning the topic of the inoculations, involving indeed 99 million people, there has been a major increase of several serious adverse events, including, for instance, myocarditis, heart attacks, cerebral venous sinus thrombosis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, among others. There has been further serious adverse events that have been increasing. Other risks that have also experienced a major increase are the so-called spike protein related risks, and these include, for instance, immune, genetic, and cellular damage. One of the identified risks within this spike protein related risks is the so-called immune dysregulation. This was identified by the famous French-British geneticist called Henrion Gott, and according to her, persistent exposure to this spike protein could lead to autoimmune responses. Moreover, and according to the famous Dr. Karina Acevedo Whitehouse, according to her, there's also the risk of cellular pathogenicity. And this means, and according to her, her finding highlights that the spike protein itself could directly damage endothelial cells. Another important spike protein related risk is genetic dysfunction. Indeed, and according to a study carried out by 19 German scientists, mRNA, so the technology that was present within these inoculations, so mRNA mechanisms could indeed alter gene regulation, potentially leading to, for instance, autoimmune disorders or even cancer. Another important aspect that I wanted to share with you is something that has been studied, highlighted, and denounced by the doctor that I have already referred to, Karina Acevedo Whitehouse, and according to her, there were evident safety issues in the inoculations, the mRNA inoculations testing and authorization. According to her, there were insufficient preclinical testing, short clinical trial durations, and a lack of long-term safety data. She is very openly denouncing, based on her study and all the evidences that she has been collecting, that there were these major safety issues. And of course, according to her, and also in my view, based on what they have been investigating, of course, this seems very much connected with the rise of these health risks that I have been explaining. After having explained this increase of risks, of health-related risks, I'm going to talk about lawsuits, state compensations, and even AstraZeneca's acknowledgement. So I would like to start by mentioning that many individuals are taking legal action concerning the mRNA vaccine side effects in many countries. These include Great Britain, Germany, Spain, Switzerland, Ireland, and also the US. Due to the inoculations side effects, but also by these pharmaceutical companies' practices, for instance, Pfizer has been sued in the US by the state of Kansas and also Texas Attorney General. It's also quite representative, I would say, that some public administrations have been even condemned to pay to vaccinated individuals due to these inoculations' harmful side effects. This has been the case of Spain. If I'm remembering it correctly, I would say that it was in Extremadura, so the region of Spain, and this has also been the case in Switzerland. Last but not least, and of course this is also quite important and serious and at the same time representative, the pharmaceutical company, one of the pharmaceutical companies that developed this kind of inoculation, AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca has even acknowledged in legal documents during a court in the UK that its inoculation could indeed have a harmful effect, which is a syndrome known as TTS. So after having explained these risks, health risks related to the inoculations and also the last news concerning how evident the phenomenon or the existence of harmful effects deriving from these inoculations is, I just would like to make a general comment just to highlight the connection that this example of inoculations has with the critique that I have been doing, with the two-level critique that I have been doing of Newtonian medicine. So I don't want to make this very long, but just to give you some examples of the connections. For instance, a clear connection with the ontological critique that I've done is the aspect that at the end, concerning the inoculations, the same treatment, the same inoculation was offered to everybody, to every segment of society and of the population. And of course, this is a perfect reflection and a consequence of the ontology of Newtonian medicine, right? This materialist, reductionist, and mechanistic view that, of course, views our body as a standardized system, right? As an homogeneous system. So independently from the emotional state of the person, the physical state, etc., our body, our internal body as well, is still seen as something homogeneous, let's say. And this is the reason why, for instance, concerning the example of the inoculations, we perfectly identify this perspective and the assumption that I was explaining in the previous parts, this so-called universal treatment assumption, because the same treatment is promoted and offered to every person, independently of the mentioned relevant aspects. Last but not least, yes, an evident connection of this example with the second level critique, so with the operational critique, is the fact that the existence of safety issues concerning the inoculations testing and authorization clearly highlights how very often the involvement of the pharmaceutical industry and of the pharmaceutical companies themselves sometimes implies unsafe practices and also corrupt and manipulative behavior, in the sense that there's more and more evidence how these inoculations were developed and also promoted and sold were not very honest, let's say. And this is very much related with what I was highlighting, and there's more and more evidence of the bad practices concerning how the pharmaceutical industry exercises its influence, in this case in the area of health and medicine, Newtonian medicine. So I just would like to make a final comment considering this specific example, and it's the fact that very often the fact that a topic has become a kind of taboo is indeed a very paradoxical and symptomatic signal, let's say, because nothing irrelevant tends to be hidden, right? And very often when some topic has become a taboo, it's because it might be representing something important, and in my view it's evident why this topic has been hidden. And when there's nothing to be hidden, there's no need to build a taboo. So why has there been so much fear around this topic and this taboo? And of course it's because it's a very important and very sensitive topic, but with very important implications at the same time. So before drawing the final conclusion, I just would like to briefly mention that for sure I will be sharing with you the name of the books and also the sources on my Instagram account, so through the Instagram post that I will be sharing with you as part of this video. And I think that of course I will be able to add, I'm not sure if I will be able to add all the sources at the YouTube description, but of course I will try to add the totality of them. And concerning the book recommendations, I will be also recommending them now, so that I will be able to share with you also the slides in, if I'm not wrong, at this part of the screen concerning the topic of understanding reality and health beyond this Newtonian framework. You have several books in English as well as in Spanish, which are the following. You have the book The Biology of Belief. The second book is You Are the Placebo. And the third one is The Visionary Window. And then concerning another book, which would be also, only available in English, it's The Mind and the Brain. So concerning books about the pharmaceutical overreliance and this involvement and influence by the pharmaceutical industry, I will be recommending the following books. Concerning the books that you have available in Spanish and in English, you have Doctoring the Mind and Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime. Concerning a book about this topic that it's only available in Spanish, this book is the following: Crónica de una sociedad intoxicada, which has been written indeed by a doctor, by a famous Spanish doctor that was very critical with the topics or with the phenomenon of the inoculations, etc. And last but not least, and concerning two books about the most sensitive topic, in a sense, which is the one of the inoculations, I have found and, in a sense, used two books, or at least the information provided by these two authors, that they have written a book on the topic respectively. They are not available in English, unfortunately, based on what I know. However, they are available in English, but also one is also available in French, because the geneticist that has written the book is indeed half French. So the book of this French-British geneticist is called Los Aprendices de Brujo, and this book is focused on the technology, the mRNA technology that was used in these inoculations, and she is literally analyzing what this technology really is, what its implications really are, and whether it could have indeed harmful effects. And the other book is only available in Spanish, and it has been written by the famous and renowned doctor. She's from South America, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember whether she comes from Mexico or from República Dominicana. And her name is Karina Acevedo Whitehouse. I have been referring to her in the last slides. And her book is called Efectos Adversos. So this book is concerning the harmful effects, the potential harmful effects of the inoculations. Guys, we are finally coming to the end of the presentation, and before making a final comment, I just would like to highlight that the information that I have been sharing with you, specifically the one regarding the inoculations, of course are not intended to create nor promote fear, rather to share what I believe is very important information that can help us to be more aware, be more conscious, and can indeed help us to make more conscious decisions and choices concerning such a relevant area as our health. And regarding this, and I would say that this is also something that I really want to highlight, is that according to one of the doctors that have been investigating and also denouncing these inoculations' harmful effects, Karina Acevedo Whitehouse, the doctor that I have been referencing and referring to, she's also clearly highlighting that most of these harmful effects can be effectively addressed so that people's respective health can indeed be restored when we are referring to this inoculations harmful effects. So I would say that this is also a very important aspect that I want to share with you. And I would say that with the information that I have been sharing with you, but also with my tone, I would say the tone that I'm using, you will also notice that being aware of sensitive information should not always imply that you should enter a state of fear or panic or even in a state of denial, right? And of course, everyone is free. I'm just mentioning what's the position that I align with and also what I believe is important. And now, coming to the very end of the presentation, I also would like to make a final comment considering this video. So the same idea or principle that I have been mentioning concerning the example of the inoculations is also applicable to this video. I'm not trying to impose my views on anyone. I'm just sharing the perspective that I, of course, identify with, and I'm sharing what I believe are important sources, evidences, etc. And I would say that the beauty of this life and our existence is that we all are free and nobody can take our freedom from us, and we can exercise this freedom, of course, also not only by questioning things but also by making choices, taking decisions and steps, and also when we are talking about our health. I hope, guys, that you have enjoyed this video. I'm aware, as I have been highlighting throughout the whole video, that it's a sensitive topic, but it's something that I really felt that I needed to cover because, of course, the topic of our health plays a fundamental role in our life. And I just would like to end this video by highlighting that while this video has been based on a critique, the next video, which is a video of the same series as this one, will be a kind of opposite video, in the sense that after having explained what's the framework that I don't identify with and that I don't believe that it's the most advanced one, let's say, in the second video, I will be indeed explaining what's the another perspective or another way of understanding health that, of course, I identify with, I align with, and I already introduced you that it will be very interesting but very powerful as well. So be prepared in a sense, and I thank you very much, guys, for your attention and presence, and see you in the next video.